All right, part three of a three-part series, a year in review. We turn to the Shame of Sherwood featuring Bob Ross division. Obviously, a great division, highly competitive. We will touch on some of the the bigger successes of the division as we get into the podcast here, but we are looking at Ted as the lone representative of this division in the Super Bowl, and at the end of the podcast, I'll leave you with my Super Bowl prediction. Rather than start with my observations, I will read you a couple paragraphs sent to me today by Ben Boris, who is always very outspoken in his defense of his own division. So Ben says, "I give Lane Bryant respect for having the late season best team," referring to Plotzker, as well as the wild card team, referring to Oaks, but it is easy to make the argument that our division was better. 3 of the top 4 teams in the OI record. That's incredible. Divisional alignment screwed both Bootsy and myself, though still think it was fun, referring to divisional alignment. Our teams also stayed strong basically all year. People say that Ted's team fell off, but he was still going 2-0 most weeks, and in the second half, he was just so good weeks 1 through 4. Everything after that sort of felt like a letdown. I know that you have been including division winner quotes, thoughts, either in the podcast or alongside in an email. Since this is obviously not possible for our division, I submit this brief statement. Division winner Ted was unavailable for direct comment, and for that matter, indirect or even hypothetical comment. Attempts to contact him in his spider hole in northern Iraq, where he is content to live out his days in this league, were largely futile, though the division and potential league champ did leave this note on his hatch, the paper visibly greasy, Cam Newton, bacon. Thanks. That's a very well written, Ben. Ben also continues by saying, "I think it would be funny to draw comparisons between the two, Ted and Newton. My initial thoughts are, 3 years ago, Ted is clown and Cam is a JUCO transfer, nobody believing in them. Last year, Ted has a very solid season, looks very promising, but is anyone really sure that he can continue to perform on the big stage of a 12-team multi-matchup league? Same deal about Cam coming out of college. Is he ready? Even though he won the Heisman, won the national title, can he compete in the NFL? This year, both come out of the gate dominant, unquestioned best team / best rookie. As the season goes on, all they can do is slowly slip away." Ben puts in parentheses here, if you're going to be really racy, draw comparisons between how John Fox's love of the running game isolated Cam in a similar fashion as how Nicky's love of isolating Ted has isolated Ted. All right, well said, Ben. We'll go through my review here, and we'll see, if your breakdown stands up. As far as the final standings are concerned, Ted finished in first with a record of 21-7. Ben finished in second place with a record of 15-13. Billy finished in third with a record of 13-15, and Bootsy was bringing up the rear with a record of 12-16. This division had a lot of great waiver pickups. We actually have a tie for the best waiver pickup of the year. Darren Sproles for $3 to Billy, and Tim Tebow for $78 to Bootsy. The production that Sproles gave Billy for just $3 really was fantastic. He was a number 1 back in an outstanding offense, really was one of the best backs in fantasy all this whole year, especially coupled with the fact that Billy had Drew Brees, made for a pretty sick combo. Tebow, however, is also one of the best running backs in fantasy, and he happens to throw touchdown passes every once in a while. So, Bootsy picking up Tebow gave him the flexibility to trade away Jay Cutler, which really helped him shore up his squad by adding Larry Fitzgerald. So there you have a tie. Honorable mention, and this is just for the only reason this is not the winner, and this is just an honorable mention, is because of the sheer dollar amount. Carson Palmer for $119 to Billy. Palmer was pretty good. Has been pretty good. He's turned the ball over a lot, but he's been very consistent. Basically all Billy could hope for. I think we can finally say that all the work that Billy and some other teams contributed to picking him up was worth it. Also honorable mention, best waiver pickup, Ben getting Laurent Robinson for $13. Robinson had a great last couple weeks. As far as the worst waiver pickup is concerned, I would say this would be John Beck for $50 to Ted. This was just a complete waste. Ted had 2 great quarterbacks on his roster, and he also picked up Christian Ponder the same week. Beck really sucked it up for 3 weeks, hasn't played since. Ponder, is not great, but was all the bye week supplement that Ted could have needed. So spending 50 on John Beck was a complete waste. Honorable mention for worst waiver pickup would be Bootsy getting Isaac Redman for $21. $21 is a lot of money to spend on someone that I think was the principal of my Hebrew school. Redman never did anything really. He had a good couple quarters or halves, and for the most part was ineffective. It should also be mentioned that Bootsy had picked up and dropped Victor Cruz at the beginning of the season, so that was not necessarily the worst waiver pickup, but that might have been the worst waiver drop. As far as the draft is concerned, the best draft pick, pretty obviously is Cam Newton for $5 to Ted. Ted, please don't act like you knew what you were doing, but, you lucked into him. You were smart enough to take him. Cam, it was possibly the best fantasy rookie quarterback of all time. In addition to just putting up crazy passing stats, he set the all-time quarterback record for rushing TDs, which, we all know are worth an extra 2 points, so just made him that much more valuable. I might be wrong, but I think he might lead the league in rushing touchdowns. I don't know, maybe Peterson or maybe like Maurice Jones-Drew has a couple more, but he's certainly in the top 5 with all the running backs. Cam, was not only great this year for Ted, but he promises to be great for years to come, as Ted will obviously be keeping him. Honorable mention, Ted also drafted Jimmy Graham, who turned out to be fantastic, and Ben picked up Tony Gonzalez for $0, which was great, especially because he paired him with Matt Ryan down the stretch actually not down the stretch for most of the season, so that was a good pick there. As far as the worst draft pick, I would say Bootsy spending $30 on Jermichael Finley. Actually, I had a conversation with a Packer fan friend of mine the other day. Kind of lost in the shuffle of the Packers' amazing, incredible season is how quietly disappointing Finley has been. He has 683 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns, which is not terrible. Certainly, it's obviously better than a number of tight ends in the league. But given his athleticism, given the lack of any other tight ends in that offense, given the fact that he plays with Aaron Rodgers and how they're just stacking up points, shouldn't he be dominating? Shouldn't he be putting up 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown, more than that? 3 of his 6 touchdowns came in one game against the Bears. I don't want to play the game where you take one game away, but if you take that game away, he only has 3 touchdowns all year. He hasn't been hurt. He's been healthy all this whole season. So his bad games have far outnumbered his good games. He's you can count on 2 fingers the number of good games he's had. So it's been a pretty disappointing season for him. To put this pick in perspective, Bootsy also drafted Aaron Hernandez, who put up almost identical numbers to Finley for $29 less. So that's the worst draft pick. Honorable mention, Ben getting Andre Johnson for $70. Obviously you can't fault Ben for making this pick at the time. I actually remember thinking it was a low price when he got him. I thought it was a steal, and I was sort of planning on getting Andre Johnson. But Johnson's just had a miserable year. He's given Ben almost nothing. He's pulled more hamstrings than I thought humanly possible. So obviously things didn't work out for that $70. And let's not forget that Ben spent $2 on Nate Kading, who was lost for the year with a torn ACL in Week 1. It was the only kicker who went for that kind of cash. So it was pretty amazing. All right, as far as the best trade, I looked through, really, no one in this division really got away with any big steals or any big-time draft moves that really blew me away. And that's not to say that there was a whole bunch of bad ones, but, this division just drafted pretty well, and the teams that did well were all guys that they started with, or they made some good waiver pickups. Really, the best trade I could find for this division was Ben getting Fred Jackson and Matt Ryan from Deutsch for Michael Turner. Michael Turner was pretty good for a couple weeks when Deutsch had him, so it's not like it was that big of a victory for Ben, but getting Matt Ryan was pretty key for him, as he definitely was pretty weak at quarterback at the time. As far as the worst trade is concerned, this one was definitely Bootsy giving away Aaron Hernandez to Deutsch for Kerry Collins. I'm pretty confident Kerry Collins was declared legally dead earlier in the season, and Hernandez was a consistent baller, especially the last couple weeks. As far as honorable mention for the worst trade, Ted giving Anquan Bolden and Vernon Davis to Krause for Joe Adai, David Nelson, and Ben Watson, all of who are absolutely terrible. Vernon Davis is a little hot and cold. Anquan Bolden was decent, nothing fantastic, but, come on, Adai, Nelson, and Watson, all 3 are just totally worthless. As far as the biggest margin of victory is concerned, in Week 5, Ted beat Ben by the score of 167 to 5. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. 167.5 to 86.82. That was a margin of 80.68 points. So that was a pretty severe beatdown. The longest win streak of the year, Ted started the season on a 10-game winning streak, including 3 weekly high points. Should be noted that Ben actually won 9 of his last 10 matchups, almost equaled Ted's 10-game winning streak to close out the year. The longest losing streak of the year, Bootsy losing 6 games in a row to end the season. He did win one of his last 2 matchups against Justin to avoid a 7-game losing streak. As far as weekly high points are concerned with this division, Ted absolutely crushed weekly high points this year. He won it 5 times, including 3 in a row to start the year. He set the high water mark for the year in Week 6 with 167.5 points. That might be the highest score of all time. I'm not sure. I didn't go back to check, but it might. It's certainly up there. It was the highest this year. Ben hit weekly high points twice in Week 10 and Week 14. Billy and Bootsy each hit it once. Shame of Sherwood featuring Bob Ross was the only division to have all 4 members hit the weekly high points at least once, and they also clearly won it the most times with a total of 9 out of our 14 weeks. So pretty impressive there. As far as the matchup of the year is concerned, this was Week 12 a couple weeks ago. Ted beating Ben 132.56 to 131.18. Really high scoring, great effort by both teams. Ted got huge games from Cam Newton and Tom Brady, but he trailed Ben by 19.06 points, headed into what was supposed to be a big Monday night showdown between the Giants and the Saints. It turned into a pretty ugly game. But, I wrote in the Monday morning update that morning, Ted trails Ben by 19.06 points with Jimmy Graham going tonight. This could be a monumental effort, but coming off a bye week, would anyone really be shocked if Jimmy Graham goes off for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns? And guess what Jimmy did that night, my friends? He put up 84 yards and 2 touchdowns just a few hours later. I don't like to toot my own horn that often, but I totally called that. The crushing loss here really effectively ended Ben's wildcard hopes and propelled Ted to a division title. So that was your matchup of the year. That was your year in review for all 3 divisions. Thank you guys for listening. Appreciate it. We do only have one matchup left. This is basically going to be my last podcast, unless you want to consider the year-end awards to be a podcast, but we're going to do that live. This is basically it. Thanks for listening to the podcast this year. I appreciate it. I feel like we made some good leaps, and I like the YouTube format and everything, so we'll definitely be doing that again next year. As far as the Super Bowl this weekend is concerned, it is Denenberg versus Ted. Ted has obviously a very good team. He's got Brady playing at home against the Dolphins. The Dolphins' defense has been decent. Cam Newton gets Tampa Bay, whose defense has been absolutely terrible, so expect big points coming from Cam. I believe earlier in the year when Cam played the Buccaneers, he killed them. I think he put up some monster fantasy total. It was like 30 plus points fantasy. So, look for that to happen again. Jimmy Graham going on Monday Night Football. But some of his weaker players are looking pretty ugly. Who knows what you're going to get out of Barber. Maurice Morris, I don't think plays anymore. Ben Tate has been very hot cold. I mean, they might be running him hard. But I know you look at Denenberg's team, and obviously, again, it's going to depend on Roethlisberger's injury. I know that things are sort of looking like Roethlisberger is going to play, and you get Ben and Wallace against the Rams' miserable secondary. That could be a recipe for disaster. Also, Frank Gore is playing on the road. He's playing at Seattle, which is a slightly tough matchup, but I seem to remember LaShawn McCoy slicing them up for a couple touchdowns not too long ago. And also, you're going to get Mike Vick for Denenberg, who looks like he's finally getting healthy again, and he's got a huge showdown playing at Dallas. So you're not going to have to worry about weather. It'll be nice and warm. They're playing on turf down there. Vick should be balling. If you remember the first time they played the Cowboys, they got pretty shut down. But I think the Eagles are sort of hitting their stride. So I got to say, looking at the matchups, and obviously you can never tell, but looking at the matchups, it looks like Denenberg is going to be the league champ. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Ted certainly has the potential, but it really looks like if Roethlisberger plays, or even if it's Charlie Batch, the Rams are just that bad that Denenberg could probably do it, win by probably 10, 15, 20 points, somewhere in that range. It is going to come down to Monday night. It is going to be Saints hosting the Falcons. It looks like Denenberg is probably going to be starting Lance Moore, and it looks like Ted is probably going to be starting Jimmy Graham, I'm sure. We'll see if it's close, if it comes down to it. Drew Brees is going to be passing up a storm. could be pretty interesting. So good luck to both guys. We'll be hoping for an exciting matchup. Hope it comes down to the end. And otherwise, thanks for listening to the podcast.